Good afternoon. So before I get started, I want to get to know you. I want to know who's in the room. So raise your hand if you've experienced burnout this year. A lot of you. Raise your hand if you've experienced conflict in your teams that left you exhausted sometime in the last year. Yeah. Raise your hand if even silently you felt, even a part of you, I'm not good enough. Maybe I don't have the right skill sets to perform. Yeah. Raise your hand if you felt like your team or your colleague, they were not performing like you want them to, and you had to take control. Yes. Now, raise your hand if you ever felt truly alone in these struggles. You had no one to talk to, no one truly to vent to. You just felt alone in your struggles. Keep your hands raised. Tell the truth. Are you truly alone in your struggles? No, look around you. So, you debug every day. You create products, you iterate on the products, you ship products, you launch, you change the environment if you need to, you upgrade. But the most important thing you never look at, and perhaps is costing you your inner peace, costing you energy, costing you exhaustion, are your inner self. The one that shows up under pressure, the one that shows up when you feel like you need to take control, you need to perform, you need to get things done, and the one that you neglect in the process, how you show up, how you lead, how you manage your relationship, how you manage conflict under pressure. There's a version of you that shows up, and you know that version of you. Sometimes you're perhaps not so proud of that version of you. You still show up. I will hold that. There we go. You guys can hear me okay still? Great. So, today I'm here to teach you something and explain to you something that perhaps no one ever explained to you before. Again, you ship products, you decode every day, but what about your inner systems, your inner codes? And we talked about these. You show up, and a lot of these show up as burnout, perfectionism, control, disconnection. Who can relate to these at work? Yeah. So the most important thing I'm going to talk about, and every leader, everyone have ever worked with, has these 5 codes. The 5 patterns, actually every human. So it doesn't matter if you're a leader, doesn't matter if you're a software engineer, agile coach, project manager, or a janitor. These are the 5 codes, the patterns that are running your life. And before I reveal to you, and also these codes are literally deciding your life. They're in the unconscious. And before I reveal to you what those codes are, I'm going to tell you who I am and how I came across it. So, my name is Nita Chakrabarty. I am a leadership and relationship coach and an advisor. And before I landed into this field, before I landed into this career, I was just like you. I was working in Silicon Valley, in tech, I was leading teams. I was traveling all over the world, implementing systems. I was leading quality assurance teams, product teams. I was working with software engineers. And I was working with one of the big tech companies like Apple or e-commerce field. So I've been there. And I've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of you guys. And I worked really hard. I loved my career, I loved my job, I traveled a lot, but I worked in high-stake fields. And I was overachieving, I was doing really well, I was always performing at the neglect of my own health. I was also doing all the other things at work, joining all the employee resource groups, running charity events. I was that high achiever. And what happened to me? I completely burnt out. I had many signals on the way. I didn't listen. I didn't listen to my body. I completely burnt out. I abandoned my own self. So this burnout got me into a deep, let's say, sabbatical, where I travel across the whole world, from the Indian Himalayas to the mountains of Peru. Now I'm living in Mexico. I've been to Spain, all over the world, trying to find cure for my health. I had an autoimmune diagnosis, my adrenaline fatigue, burnout, and I needed to fix myself. I thought there was something so wrong with me. Like, how is it everyone is doing so well and I could no longer function anymore? So this burnout has caused me to meet with functional doctors, study medicine, study psychology, study neuroscience, to even go see shamans in Peru. I did everything to learn about what's wrong with me, how do I fix myself. So until I ran across these 5 codes that really changed everything. So I'm going to reveal that to you. But the one lesson out of all those things I learned, and this 5 codes teaches you that, is the most important system you'll ever maintain is the one that lives inside of you. Because you're nothing. Without your health, you're nothing. If you don't know yourself, your boundaries, your authentic self, who you truly are inside. So once I learned these 5 codes that all humans run, I call them the 5 wounds that keeps you from being your most authentic self. And they are fear of rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice. I'll explain these further as we go along. And these codes, these wounds, they're not so, let's say, in the conscious mind. They're living in the unconscious. They're living in our body. You see, we used to, let's see if I can get that back. I don't know how that happened. There we go. We used to live in tribes, yeah? Back in the day, in ancient times, we used to live in tribes, and we had to be in tribes to survive. Let's say we got rejected. Well, we can no longer survive living in the wild alone. Let's say we got abandoned, same thing. So these are all the codes that keeps us from being ourselves, is because we're looking for belonging and looking for safety, okay? So it's same thing with all of them. The root is we're looking for belonging, we're looking for safety, we want to be somewhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just don't know that some of these, at least 2 of them, are running your inner world. And it affects how you lead, affects your work, it affects your inner life, your love, and your relationship, and the most intimate relationship is your partner. It affects if you're a father, your mother, affects all aspects of your life, not just your career. Okay, so we're gonna go through each one of them. So rejection. Rejection is all about belonging. You feel like you want to belong to a crowd, right? Here, you come to this conference, you guys have seen each other for many years, you feel a belonging. The sense of belonging is really important to a human being. But what happens when you don't feel belong, right? It almost always manifests as you being invisible. A lot of us, they have this fear so much that someone will reject us so much that we reject ourselves first. We see a crowd of people and then we're like, they're not going to accept me. They're going to reject me. So I'm going to stay invisible. I'm going to reject myself so they can't hurt me. And how does this show up at work? I was working with an engineer, and he was a brilliant mind. And in meetings, he would always stay quiet. So no one really got to know him. He seemed emotionally withdrawn, like he didn't care. But I knew he was so good at his job. So I was always validating him. I'm telling him to speak up. But he never felt confident, or he never spoke up in meetings. Because why? This fear was running. He's like, no one cares. He just retreated and disappeared. And secretly, he was building resentment as all of his colleagues were getting praised, validated, they were getting promoted. So I had a talk with him. What's going on? What's happening? And why are you just, your colleagues, the feedback was your colleagues feel like you don't care. What's happening? And that small talk started giving him confidence to see that he's not so different from others. He belongs. All of us are unique, but he felt a little bit of belonging because someone reached out, someone talked to him, someone praised his work, and then he started showing up. Then he started sharing his ideas. So you can see the core emotion was he felt shame that he was different from everyone. He didn't want to raise his hand. He didn't want to say anything, even though he was super brilliant and he was most of the time, 99% of the time, he was right about everything. So he worked in isolation. That's what happens when you wear this mask. So key thing about all of these wounds is there's a mask that you wear to hide your wounds, to run away from your wounds. And that's what's happening. Let's go on to the next one. Fear of abandonment. This is a personal one for me. I might be left. I worked in high-stake IT consulting. Yeah, one of the top fours, big fours. You either move up, you're on the partner track, or you move out. So what did I do? I outperformed everyone. Why? Because I want to be left out. If all my colleagues, if all my starting group, of consultants, if they're all getting moved up, I need to outperform them. I need to feel like I'm doing well. I need to feel reassurance. This is what the mask that I wear, the mask of dependency, the mask seeking constant reassurance. And how did I do that? Through getting titles, through getting promoted, through getting better projects, through signing up for everything at work and having zero boundaries because I was overperforming, and that caused my burnout. So that's the fear of abandonment. And again, this happens at a very young age. It could be like your dad went to work and you, in your little child's brain, at 3-year-old, were like, oh my God, I've been abandoned. And that code is running your entire life up until now in your 40s. That's how it happens. And again, it's in the unconscious. So if you are seeing yourself in this, if you're seeking constant reassurance, if you have difficult delegating, if you're codependent in your leadership patterns, this is the core emotion, is that fear. The fear of abandonment, fear of being left alone and completely left behind. Next one, humiliation. Again, this is a very personal one for me too. So humiliation might sound like abandonment, but it's not, because the mask that we wear is perfectionism. You never show up until something is so perfect. You are constantly people-pleasing at the expense of yourself, and you're just being agreeable, you're being easy. This is a humiliation. There's that deep shame, but along with powerlessness, you believe that something is inherently wrong with you. There's some flaws that you don't want to show to the world, so that you wear this perfectionism mask. You know, this is a personal one I mentioned, is because I've been publicly humiliated many times in my childhood by my own father, by my peers, and even in my adulthood at work. So, can you imagine? I actually had to let go of my perfectionism to show up here today to share my gifts with you. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. I would be invisible. That's what like individuals with this mask of perfectionism does. They don't completely show up. On the outside, everything looks fine with them, but they don't like so much public appearance. When they do, they have to be perfect at everything. And again, all of this is hiding ourselves from our most authentic human being that we are. Here's another one, betrayal. I have a client. He's a CEO of an IT AI company. And this betrayal. So when you have this betrayal wound, it goes so deep, because it's like, let's say your mom and dad didn't keep your promises. There were inconsistencies in your home. So you have this, like, I can't trust another human being. I can't trust anything in life. And main thing is, if you can't trust others, the most important thing is you actually don't trust yourself. So this CEO that I mentioned of a tech company, he came to me and he's like, okay, do a rundown of my company, tell me what's going on. I don't think my workers are actually performing. I think they're taking advantage of me. I don't know what I'm paying them for. So I'm going to implement timesheets, and I want to know exactly what they're doing at every hour and every single minute. Yeah? They micromanage. They take control. They have a hard time delegating. They want to see every single processes. So they don't allow, imagine you're working under the CEO and you have all these other wounds. You're not going to feel creative. You're not going to feel you have the spaciousness to do your work and do your job if you have to report what you're doing every single hour of every single day, right? Yeah. So he had real difficulty trusting others. Now imagine if you're with a colleague, your boss has the betrayal wound, and you might have fear of rejection. You're in a conversation, and he's hiring you probably for this new role and this new project that's available, but immediately he's coming from the wound. I can't trust. We don't have a rapport. I'm not sure. And you're trying to present yourself. Yes, I want that role. I'm really excited. And then he's just like, he's coming off like, I can't trust you. And then you have this deep fear of rejection. So when he doesn't choose you, you're like, wow, this world, I don't know, I don't even know why I even went for that role, right? I should have just like never applied. That's how it shows up. It's two people having misunderstanding. His reaction or his and your behavior, it's nothing to do with each other. You're just working from your wounds. That's what's happening. And again, core emotion of this one is anger. And when you have the betrayal wound, you have a hard time delegating and you take control. So next one, injustice. This one shows up a lot in terms of at workplace, right? Women not getting paid enough, the double standards in society, in culture. A lot of people that are working for the governments in policies, this really shows up. So the fear of betrayal that we talked about, the CEO is adding more processes, adding more, things to improve and, putting those in. But if you have the injustice wound, you make standards, you make policies, you make rules. So it's policies over processes. And you're the worst criticism of yourself. So a lot of people that work in even domestic violence, by the way, there's nothing wrong with having this wound. Actually, they're fire to your motivation. You might change policies and that changes the world. So these are great. It's just to be aware of what mask you're wearing. You're a rigid enforcer if you have the injustice wound. And if you're running a team with this rigid enforcement of rules, policies, what happens? There's no creativity. If you're running an innovative tech company, your people are not going to feel creative enough to expand, create new products, have that flow. They're not going to have this harmonious team where they're collaborating. Everyone is fearing for their job because there's so many rules that are in process, that are in place. So this is the injustice wound and how it shows up in leadership and at work. And again, there's nothing wrong with having this wound. It's how you react, how you respond, how you show up. That's the mask. And to be aware of when these things are taking over under stress, that's not you, that is a part of you, but you know how to change that. And how you change that is more emotional regulation. First, being aware, but regulating your emotions. And again, core emotion of that is frozen rage. So, what we learned is your work personality is often your protection pattern. So, the perfectionism, overachiever, the controller, all of these are versions of you that are completely acceptable, but they show up under intense pressure. Now, next time you feel like one of these is taking over, you know which wound you're operating from. And now that you're aware of the 5 wounds, you can also start to see your colleagues and have deep empathy. That sometimes maybe there's a conflict, sometimes there's burnout, and that's nothing to do with the workload. It's the mask you're showing up as. You're taking on more work when no one is asking you to. Or if you're taking on and saying yes to everything instead of having boundaries and not, taking care of yourself. You're abandoning yourself. You're abandoning your health. That's how it all shows up. So again, your wound is not the problem. It's the mask that becomes the limitation. That's your cage. And we developed these masks to survive. They helped us early on in our childhood, but they are an expired coping mechanisms. They are no longer helping you thrive, not in your career, not in your job, not in your personal relationships. So if you can change any of this, if you take any of these topics today and you start to apply it, if you start to apply it in your work, you'll also notice that your relationships will change as well. So this is just, first thing is to be extremely aware of all of these wounds that you might be operating from. Now, I mentioned that all of you at least have 2. So can you tell me you started to identify 1 or 2 already based on what I have already shared? Yeah. And I have something for you guys later on, so stay tuned. I'll share with you so you can know exactly what your personal wounds are and the mask that you're showing up as. But the real thing about all of this is it keeps us small. It keeps us from being our most authentic self. You know, imagine, just because I was humiliated publicly and I never show up on stage, I never start to talk, I never start to share my own gift. Because I'm operating from my wound, I'm operating and putting on a mask. If I waited to be perfect, I would never be here. Yeah? If I didn't abandon myself early on in my career, I would have never learned the lesson of taking care of myself, having divine boundaries with my boss, and let them know, hey, I don't take emails or I don't check emails after 6 p.m. There's my phone number for emergencies. You can call me then. And then my boss says, no, that's not okay. That's not how we do things here. I know my core values. I know what I need. This company, their core values and my core values do not match. I can find something else. I can freelance. I could do something else. But I choose myself. This is about ensuring that you fill up your own cup first, and you just don't get one cup. I kind of imagine like a champagne, those glass, like top 5 are all yours, and anything that outpours fills up all the other people around you. So to make sure that you're coming from a space of wholeness, and that is your authentic core. When you notice these patterns, when you notice this mask, that's what they teach you. Where in your life you can just take those small steps to improve a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about self-acceptance. It's about self-compassion. So again, your leadership style. Someone was asking me, okay, so you're a leadership coach, but I'm an individual contributor. But I've shown to you, all of this applies to all human. But your leadership style, when I talk about being a leadership or leadership coach, I'm talking about how you lead life, how you lead your relationship, how are you leading your children, not just talking about work. So this applies everywhere. So maybe your current leadership style is your wound in a suit, and you can start to notice those. And how do you improve? And healing and transforming these is about meeting the wound itself. It's about really looking at it. So like I said, all of you have at least 2. Some people might have 3 or 4 and 5. Actually, we all have pretty much all of them at certain point of our life. And when we work through one of them, other might show up and reveal themselves, because again, these are in the unconscious mind. But it's slowly. It's about self-acceptance. It's about compassion, not self-judgment, okay? It doesn't come from perfecting your performance or strengthening your defenses even more. It's not about armoring up. It's about showing up as you are, being able to be vulnerable, being able to be your true self, and start with just one person. It could be one person at work. It could be just your colleague, your best friend, your work wife, your work husband. We have those. I had those before, you know? So it's just really, all of this work is about understanding who you are at your authentic core. That's what helps you teach. Again, self-responsibility. Taking self-responsibility, but that doesn't mean you blame yourself. It's not about self-judgment. So your response is yours, and their behavior is theirs. Just know that when there's a conflict, there might be 2 different wounds you're operating from. And once you start to see this lens, I introduced you a new lens, a new point of view, So once you start to see when there's conflicts happening, both with your inner self or anyone in front of you, you can start to see how these patterns are arising in your life. And again, this is just awareness. I was giving a 40-minute talk, so I can give you the awareness. You're probably wondering, okay, how do I fix everything? Okay, how do I go from 0 to 100? I want to change, I want to improve. What do I do, Nita? Well, first, step by step. I talked about boundaries, having boundaries. And have you ever set boundaries with someone and you set boundaries because you want to continue the relationship, right? Like, hey, when you come into my house, I'd like you to take off my shoes because you want that person to come back, right? You want that relationship to flow. So you see, when someone sets boundaries with you, they want to continue that relationship. But if you have a rejection wound, or if that person has a wound of rejection, they might feel you're rejecting them, but you're not. You're just simply saying, I want our relationship to continue, but we need to have certain boundaries. That's what's happening. So that's how these wounds work. Protect your space, speak your truth, do it anyway. These are just like stepping into courage. Imagine when you're creating from your wound versus you're creating from a space of wholeness, which would feel much better. A lot of people do create from their wound, and there's nothing wrong with that. But over time, as we mature, as we get older, as we get aware of how our patterns are, we can start to be more of our authentic self, then we can even thrive and create better products, create better systems, because our inner architecture is flowing. They're talking to each other. They're not working in different islands or different parts, or they're not trying to hide ourselves by wearing different masks. That's what happens when you start to work with these wounds and dissolve your masks. So some of the takeaways that I talked about today: your leadership style is your wound in a suit. It doesn't mean that it has to be that way, because now you know these 5 wounds, you know the mask that it shows up, and you know the core emotions. And next I will show you what you can do to upgrade your inner architecture. And healing is not about fixing. I give you my story. I went all over the world trying to fix myself, and the thing was so simple, is to learn about the 5 codes. And I started to see my own patterns, and I start to do something about them. I start to have more courage. I start to express myself. I started to set boundaries. I started to take my power back. Yeah? These wounds, you can't think your way out of them. They're in the unconscious mind. Our unconscious runs 95% of the show. So it's not about thinking, it's actually in your nervous system, it's encoded. As I mentioned, it's a tribal thing. It came from our DNA. So every human is operating like this. So in order to work through this is to do more somatic healing, breath work, to take breaths, to look at your reaction. Take a deep breath before you respond. Listen to your body, listen to your intuition, listen to your feelings, and we'll go more into that later. Another thing, what you resist in yourself, you'll reject in others. If someone is showing up and they're triggering you in some way, somehow, that lives within you, and that's something you reject. Yeah? If you hate how someone is so perfect, and you look at that person, you're like, oh my God, how is this person so perfect? They're always showing up, I can never be like that. That perfectionism also lives within you. You're just rejecting it. It's another wound that you hide with a mask. So, and again, the wound is not the problem. It's the mask. It's the wrap that you put around your wound. And once you take that off, yes, it might be vulnerable, but you're being human. You're showing your real self to the world. And that's what true leadership is. You lead by example. Once you do that, other people in your team will also show up as themselves. They will feel belonging. They'll feel like they can share their ideas. They want to collaborate. They will no longer try to work in isolation. That's what happens. Lead by example so you give permission slip to others to be their authentic self. And again, these patterns protected you as a child. As a 3-year-old child's mind when you adopted these coping mechanisms, but they no longer need to run your life. So today is the day you get aware of these and you make an intention to change one step at a time. Some reflection to think about. It's not about fixing yourself. So ask yourself, what part of you or your life would finally feel lighter if you stop trying to fix yourself? You stop trying to think something is actually wrong with you and you completely had divine self-acceptance, self-compassion for exactly who you are. So, again, I have only 40 minutes, so I can't give you everything all at once and tell you this is exactly what you do to upgrade your system. So I do have something for you. It's a free gift, and it's called the Inner Debugging Diagnostic for tech leaders, software engineers, specifically made for Build Stuff attendees. So you can scan this, and you can identify your primary and secondary wound. There's a quiz. And then you can start to discover your leadership mask. So the mask that you're wearing right now, and how can you upgrade yourself to become more of that authentic you, the step-by-step. So this is a larger, longer manual that you can really work through either tonight or after the conference. I know you have a lot going on. And yeah, check it out. This is your transformation. This is your transformation, guys. Okay, I can't share everything all at once today. And next, I did mention you can't think your way out of these wounds. And in order to dissolve your mask, you need to go in the unconscious to connect with your nervous system, the old ancient system that you were born with. And so I have another session that's coming up Friday the 5th. Where is it? 4:10 p.m. in the Humans OS Lab. And this is a reset breathwork, nervous system reset breathwork. And this is an experience you will lay down with music and you'll experience it yourself. And this is a whole journey to connect with your nervous system, to connect with your inner self. And you'll notice the change and the shift right away. So when you come into this breath work, set an intention. And maybe if you have already done the homework and found out your dominant primary wound and secondary wound and the mask that you're wearing, maybe you come in and say, I want to let go of the version of me that is controlling under pressure. I want to be able to delegate better. And you bring in that intention to this session. And you'll see change and the shift right away. Okay? So, if you want to connect with me, here are my information. For build stuff, during this build stuff events. If you want to connect with me, my WhatsApp is right there. Again, if you can scan that code for the manual. And yeah, are we doing questions? I don't know if anyone's up here. I can take questions if you guys have. All right. Okay, well, then in closing, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you guys listening in on a topic that's a little different than yours. So thank you for being here. I'm around if you have any questions. Feel free to do your homework. I'll see you on Friday for my session. Thank you again. Bye, y'all.